Hello, everyone, and I hope this video finds you well as usual. I've got a really interesting video here. I forget how I came across this. Well, I know I came across it a while. For some reason, recently I went to revisit it, but it's the story of DB Cooper. And there have been movies and documentaries on this sort of thing. I think it's one of the longest unsolved cases of a certain variety or cold cases, skyjackings maybe they call them, in FBI or U.S. history, I think. I thought, well, you know what, this would be great to ask about and see if I can get more details on it. Um, Part of the question is, did he survive? Where's the money? And I'll go a little bit, I'll kind of recap the story here too in a minute, but and also who he was exactly. So I've managed to get all the answers so far, and they're all made available. The person who became DB Cooper is actually just kind of a nickname. It's not a real name. It was a news error, the name itself, and it came to be known as that individual, that robbed the plane. But not that person's real name. What had happened is someone had hijacked an airplane with a bomb and asked for ransom money. And I believe it was from Portland, Oregon. It was a flight to Seattle. And then he had passed a note to the crew on board and said, I've got a bomb. And he showed it to them and let everybody off in Seattle when they landed. The authorities gave him the money. All the bills were marked, or not marked, but the serial numbers were carefully catalog. So if they ever went into circulation, they could start tracking them down. But they gave him the money, and the plane took off again. And it was taking off from Seattle to Mexico, but somewhere over Washington. And this part, there's speculation on this part too, but on where he actually jumped out. But he jumped out of the plane with a parachute, and they never found him. They found some of the money washed up a few years later in Washington, which is interesting. It's never been in circulation, and they've never found the money. And this happened back in like 71, I think, something like that. So I'll kind of explain my process and everything. And the man who committed the crime is in the afterlife. And I'll identify who that was in just a moment. I'm going to pull up the information here on Wikipedia to kind of show you all the information and kind of recap everything and go through it. Okay, so here is, you can look this up on Wikipedia. This is the DB Cooper story. And, okay, so it's $200,000. Doesn't sound like a lot. Equivalent to 1.338 million in 2021. So it's a lot. What I had done first was I was starting, not always, but I'd ask for a general question. Usually I'm talking to any one of my spiritual guides at any given moment. So I just ask, let's go through so in general, I just put the question out there. You know what, you guys, DB Cooper. So do you know who it is, and is that person in the afterlife? And I forget the exact words, but the response was definitely affirmative. Yes, we know who it is, and that person is in the afterlife. So, of course, I wanted to talk to him, if so, but first I had to figure out who it was. And when having these conversations back and forth, it's not always clear, and sometimes, words, there's silence. It's still a skill, that I'm not like really good at, but it's getting better. But so sometimes I don't hear necessarily, and I'm sure other psychics can kind of talk about this too, because when you receive messages, it's not always so fluid like it is a back and forth conversation. So for some it is, and that's the kind of level I'd like to get to. But so it's not like I'm like, yeah, here's his name and address, and let me show you his picture, and that sort of thing. It's not so clear sometimes. But that being said, so there's a list of 14 people on here, and I'd asked, well, is that individual on this list? And they said yes. Yes, they are. So when I asked what number it was, there's 14 people on here, and I did hear the number 4 multiple times. But I asked, are you guys saying 4 or 14? Because if you go through the list, 1 through 14, the word 4 would come up twice, right? So I want to make sure I wasn't hearing, like 4, minus the teen at the end for some reason. I wanted to make sure it was 4. So I'd ask, are you saying 4 like single digits or, 14? So I went back and forth between these two names here, Lynn Cooper and Walter Recca, I believe. However you say that. Back and forth until I'd settle on the answer. It was actually number 4, single digit, 1, 2, 3, 4. This person here. And I went back and forth to confirm that a few times until I was happy with the answer. So Lynn Doyle Cooper, and I read the story here. They all have interesting stories, and some even come out and claim to be him. So there's multiple people that do. So clearly, it's kind of hard to sift through everything. But remember, these sort of things, facts are preserved and can be made available to people. Psychics, for example, this sort of information, in other words, is truthfully captured. So there's no speculation here. Our lives and everything are scribed down here, and what we do to a large degree. So this information is true, in other words. So there's no speculation or anything coming from the afterlife when you get answers. These truth filters they're important to point out because information is either available or not available, or it's they have it over there, but it's not necessarily allowed to be given to you for a variety of reasons. But I have other videos on that. But this is freely available, this sort of thing. Lynn Cooper. So I asked if I could talk to Lynn, and he was immediately available. That's one of the cool things I like about psychic abilities is everybody is. I haven't come across anyone yet that isn't immediately available. So remember, in the afterlife, immortal life, that word infinite, when you say infinite life, that applies to everything because infinity is a reality in the spiritual realms, meaning all things are possible. Immortality, life, you don't have to sleep. Everybody can communicate using, your own language, for example, just like we have translators down here. He speaks English anyways, but my point here is he was just like everyone, immediately available and willing to discuss this, and he did own up to this. So we've had some actually good conversations back and forth, and I asked him, well, can you talk to me a little bit about this, and he was willing to do it. So I'd asked him, introduce myself and everything. And he said, yeah, this is Lynn. And that was me, Jerry, DB Cooper. So I was the one who did that. So actually, I talked to him and I was like, well, he did it in a very polite manner, believe it or not. No one was harmed or injured. And if I recall correctly, and he was very nice to everybody and even offered him cigarettes. So I asked him, were you, are you a career criminal? Was this new for you, or had you done other crimes? And he said, I'd done other stuff, but this was, I forget what he said. He's actually here right now too, so always available when I'm doing these kind of things, which is great. Real quick. So I was just asking too, what his exact words were. I didn't quite catch that just now. But I remember he said, yeah, that was the worst, something along those lines. That was the worst thing I'd done. I had done some other stuff, some other crimes, but that was the worst thing I'd done. So, and I said, well, just based on this, I mean, it didn't sound like, and especially, this is the word, I mean, it's pretty bad, you hijacked an airplane, but based on, this being the worst thing you've done, I mean, was it even a real bomb? And he said, yes, it was. He actually apologized. He said, I'm sorry, but it was a real bomb. And he said, I put it together. So he actually put together, it was a working bomb that he had. And I asked him, well, were you actually ready to use it? And what he had said was, the words that came through were, I'm trying to remember. It was actually earlier today. So his exact words were, oh, I wasn't going to harm anyone. The bomb was only if I was down to my last straw. That's what he said. He said I wasn't going to harm anyone. That bomb was only down to, my last straw, for example. But he said I didn't plan on actually hurting anybody or anything like that. So that was his response to that. Now, what's curious is they never found the bills in circulation. And I talked to him. Turns out he survived. There's a lot of speculation. He deployed or he jumped out, whatever you want to call it. There's some question as far as where he did jump out, somewhere over Reno or Washington. So for whatever reason, the ability to track these things 50 years ago was not as good technology-wise and everything. But some kid about 9 years later found money in the Columbia River, which would support the theory that he did jump out over Washington, which is true. So he did confirm that. He said that is where I jumped out. So because I asked him if that's where it happened, he said yes. It sure was over Washington. So. And he survived, believe it or not. And according to this story, so his niece, who was 8 at the time, heard him planning something, and remember that him and his brother, so her other uncle, were planning something, and she could hear them talking about, that they were up to something. They were supposedly turkey hunting. The day after they left is when the flight got hijacked, and he came back a couple days later, and he was all busted up just from the landing. Bruised and bloody and that sort of thing. So, but he did survive, believe it or not. And they searched and they found no trace of him. They searched for a long time, decades, I think, before they finally shut it down. No trace of the money except for, 9 years later. It had washed down from a tributary through the Columbia River and got buried in like the sandbanks or something. And some kid just happened to dig it up a few years later. Some of the bills. But Lynn did get away with some of it. He had some of the money. Now, what's interesting is it was never spent, he said. So the FBI, like the very next month after this occurred, shared the bills with the public. So they said, hey, here's the bills. Here's the serial numbers. If you guys come across these, this is stolen money. So basically at that point, he realized, you know what? Can't spend it. Can't spend it at this point. Everybody knows. They put it out there, and they put it out there pretty quickly. So that's basically the story. So he kept it, and that is why. And I'll get to that too in just a moment here. All right. Well, there it is. There's the story and the money real quick too. So, and I'm still putting this together. I'm going to do a second video on this, and I definitely will. So, Lynn Cooper is DB Cooper and did survive. The money survived. Most of it, if I heard or recall correctly. So, but he never spent it because, just like I was saying, he didn't want to get caught. So it was out there that they were looking for him. So what he did, he actually said he couldn't. When I asked him, well, what'd you do with the money? He said, well, I couldn't. Why don't you burn it? Like get rid of it. And he said, I couldn't bring myself to. He said, I couldn't bring myself to burn it. So he got in his car and he drove up to Washington and he buried it. So he lives in Oregon, but at the time, so And I don't know how far after the crime occurred that he actually buried it, but he did. So he said he got in his car and drove up to Washington and buried it. And it's still recoverable. So it's out there, and I'm gonna try to I'm gonna do a second follow-up video on its location, which I think is kind of cool. So I will do that. It is somewhere in Washington. It's in a bag and it's buried, and that's all I know for now. But it can still be recovered, most of it. So um, I think that's pretty cool, and we'll definitely put that together. So thanks again for watching. I hope you really enjoyed the video, and subscribe if you like the video. I'll be putting out more, and appreciate you watching very much. So, and if you like the video, hit the like button. And I've got so much stuff I'm excited to put out, so can't wait to do it. Hope you guys are doing great. We'll talk to you later.